Captain Jiwon Park stood on the bridge of the Harmony's Promise, watching stars drift past the view screen. Her ship wasn't built for war. It carried scientists, diplomats, and teachers. The weapons it had were old and weak, meant only to scare off pirates who never came. That was fine with her. Jiwon had spent 15 years in space and never fired a shot in anger. She was proud of that. The ship hummed softly as it traveled toward New Jeju Colony. Jiwon checked the passenger list again. Ambassador Daeho Kim was aboard, heading to celebrate another treaty. The old man had spent his whole life building bridges between humans and aliens. He told everyone who would listen that humanity's violent past was dead and buried. War was something their grandparents did. Modern humans were better than that. Jiwon wanted to believe him. Earth had joined the Galactic Assembly 73 years ago. At first, the other species were afraid. They had studied human history and seen nothing but war and violence. But humans worked hard to prove them wrong. They shared medicine and art. They mediated conflicts between alien species. They turned their warships into cargo haulers and exploration vessels. Slowly, the galaxy learned to trust them. Dr. Minji Choi walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad. She was smiling, always smiling. Minji loved her work. She studied alien biology and helped sick aliens when human and alien doctors worked together. Captain, have you seen the guest list for the celebration? The Velen Medical Council will all be there. I've been waiting years to meet them. Jiwon smiled back. How long until we arrive? 6 hours, said Ensign Yoonji Kang from the communication station. The young woman barely looked up from her screens. New Jeju is sending updates. Everything is ready. Humans and Velens have been preparing for weeks. Lieutenant Hyan Lee stood near the back of the bridge. He was quiet, as always. Hyan was head of security, though there was rarely anything for him to secure. He watched the stars with hard eyes. Jiwon noticed he seemed tense. Something wrong, Lieutenant? She asked. Hyan was quiet for a moment. Permission to speak freely, Captain? Always. We're too soft, Hyan said. Humanity has forgotten how to defend itself. We've turned all our weapons into museum pieces. We trust aliens we barely know. If something happened, we couldn't protect ourselves. The bridge went quiet. Minji stopped smiling. Yoonji looked uncomfortable. Jiwon felt a flash of annoyance. She had heard this speech before from Hyan and a few others like him. Old soldiers who couldn't let go of the past. Nothing is going to happen, Lieutenant, Jiwon said firmly. We have galactic law protecting us. We have allies. We have treaties. The galaxy is civilized now. We don't need weapons when we have diplomacy. Hyan said nothing more, but his jaw was tight. He turned back to watching the stars. The ship continued its journey. Jiwon returned to her quarters and changed into her dress uniform. The celebration would be formal. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a diplomat in a soldier's clothing. That felt right. That felt right. That was what humanity had become. Ambassador Daeho Kim found her in the corridor. He was old, his hair completely white, but his eyes were bright. Captain Park, I wanted to thank you for transporting me. This treaty means everything. Humans and Velens living together, working together. It's proof that we've changed. You built this, Ambassador, Jiwon said. You showed the galaxy who we really are. No, Daeho said softly. We all built this. Every human who chose peace over violence. Every person who proved we could be trusted. We should be proud. 6 hours later, the Harmony's Promise approached New Jeju Colony. It was beautiful. The planet was green and blue, covered in forests and oceans. Cities dotted the surface, mixing human and Velen architecture. 200,000 people lived there, half human, half Velen. They had built something amazing together. the ship entered orbit. Jiwan could see celebration lights on the surface. Fireworks were already starting, even though it was still afternoon on the main continent. She felt warmth in her chest. This was why she joined the diplomatic corps. This was what peace looked like. "Captain, we're being hailed by new Jeju Control," Unji said. "They're giving us landing clearance and welcoming us." "Thank them," Jiwan said. "Prepare the shuttles. The ambassador and his staff will go first." Minji was practically bouncing with excitement. "I heard Young Ho Nam will be performing tonight. He's a human who learned Velen music. They say he's incredible." The shuttle bay was busy. People were laughing and talking. Ambassador Daho Kim gathered his staff and went over last-minute details. Everything was perfect. Everything was safe. Hyan Lee stood apart from the others. He was checking weapons that would never be fired. Jiwan walked over to him. "Lieutenant, you're invited to the celebration too," she said. "You don't have to stay on the ship." Hyan looked at her. "Someone should stay vigilant, Captain. Just in case." "In case of what?" "We're surrounded by friends." Hyan didn't answer. He just returned to his work. Jiwan shook her head and joined the others. The first shuttle launched toward the planet. She watched it descend through the atmosphere, a small point of light heading toward the celebration below. On the planet's surface, Admiral Su Yun sat on his porch. He was retired now, living quietly in the colony. He had fought in the last wars before Earth joined the Galactic Assembly. He remembered what combat felt like, what it cost. He had grandchildren now, human and Velen both through marriage. He wanted them to never know war. But sometimes, late at night, he wondered if humanity had forgotten too much. He kept an old rifle in his closet, a weapon from the museum he had worked at before retiring. Just in case. Though he didn't know what he was preparing for. Young Ho Nam was tuning his instruments, a mix of human guitars and Velen string devices. He was 25 and had never known war. He had grown up in peace, learning music from both species. Tonight he would perform for thousands. He was nervous and excited. The celebration was starting. Humans and Velens filled the streets. Children ran and played together. Food from both cultures was everywhere. Flags from Earth and Vela hung side by side, in orbit. Jiwan Park stood on her bridge and smiled. This was what they had built. This was worth protecting. Then Ensign Yunji Kang's board lit up with warnings. Her face went pale. "Captain, I'm detecting ships. Lots of ships. They just appeared from nowhere." "Identify them," Jiwan said. "Not worried yet. Probably just more guests arriving late." Yunji's hand shook as she worked. "I don't recognize the signatures. They're not in any database. They're not responding to hails. Captain, they're arming weapons." The bridge went silent. Jiwan felt ice in her stomach. "How many ships?" 50, no more. "They're still appearing." "Captain, the Velen Defense Fleet is moving to intercept." On the view screen, the unknown ships came into view. They were massive, black, covered in weapons. They looked ancient and terrible. Hyan Lee ran onto the bridge. "Captain, we need to run. Now." Jiwan couldn't move. This wasn't possible. There were no wars anymore. There were treaties. There were laws. The unknown ships opened fire. The Velen Defense Fleet, 12 ships strong, lasted 40 seconds. They were torn apart by weapons that looked like they came from nightmares. "Get the ambassador back on board," Jiwan heard herself say. "Now, emergency evacuation of all personnel." But it was too late. The unknown ships were already firing on the planet. New Jeju shields held for almost a minute before they failed. Then the city where the celebration was happening simply vanished in light and fire. Jiwan stood frozen, watching humanity's dream burn. The first missile hit the concert hall where Young Ho Nam was supposed to perform. He was outside when it happened, carrying his instruments from his transport. The building simply stopped existing. There was light, then heat, then nothing but rubble and screaming. Young Ho dropped his instruments and ran. He didn't know where he was running to. Around him, the city was dying. Buildings collapsed. Streets cracked open. Fire was everywhere. He saw his Velen music teacher torn apart by shrapnel. He saw children, both human and Velen, lying still in the street. His mind couldn't understand it. There were no wars anymore. Everyone said so. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Admiral Su Yun heard the first explosions and knew exactly what they were. He had heard that sound before, decades ago. He ran to his closet and grabbed the old rifle. His hands remembered how to load it, even though his mind told him it was useless. What could one rifle do against ships in orbit? His wife called to him, terrified. Their grandchildren were at the celebration. He had to find them. Su Yun ran into the street and saw the sky burning. The enemy ships hung in orbit like dark stars, raining fire on everything below. He found other people in the streets, civilians with no weapons, no training. He started shouting orders, organizing them. Some part of his brain that he thought had died years ago came back to life. The warrior he used to be took over from the gentle grandfather. "Get to the shelters," he shouted. "Stay away from government buildings. They're targeting them first. Move! Move!" In orbit, Captain Ji-won Park was trying to save her ship. The Harmony's Promise wasn't built for combat. Its shields were weak. Its weapons were basically toys. She had tried to hail the enemy ships. She had tried to negotiate. They didn't even respond. They just kept killing. "Return fire," she ordered, knowing it was pointless. The Harmony's Promise fired its small weapons. The shots hit the enemy ships and did nothing. Not even scratches. The enemy ships ignored them like insects. Then one of them finally noticed. A beam of energy cut across space and hit the Harmony's Promise. The ship shuddered. Alarms screamed. Half the systems went dark. "We're crippled," Lieutenant Hyam Lee reported. His voice was calm, like he had been expecting this. "Main power is down. Weapons are offline. Shields are failing." Ji-won gripped her chair. "Why aren't they finishing us off?" "Maybe they don't see us as a threat," Minji Choi said. She had come to the bridge when the attack started. Her medical uniform was already stained with blood from treating injured crew members. "We're not worth their ammunition." Ensign Yoonji Kang was crying as she worked her console. "Captain, I'm getting reports from the surface. They're not attacking military targets. They're hitting schools, hospitals, civilian centers. They're trying to kill everyone." Ji-won felt something break inside her. This wasn't war. This wasn't even invasion. This was extermination. "Launch all shuttles," she ordered. "Get everyone who can fly down to the surface. Save who you can. Ignore the enemy ships unless they shoot at you." The Harmony's Promise became a rescue vessel. Its shuttles flew through fire and death, landing in streets full of rubble, picking up survivors. Most trips brought back fewer than 20 people. The planet had 200,000 residents. The math was terrible. Dr. Minji Choi went down with one shuttle. She found a medical center that was somehow still standing and started treating the wounded. There were too many. She worked until her hands were numb, until she couldn't see straight, and still they kept coming. A Velen doctor worked beside her. They didn't speak the same language well, but they understood each other. Save who you can. Don't think about the ones you can't. Keep working. Then the medical center took a direct hit. Minji woke up buried in rubble. She couldn't feel her left arm. She could hear screaming. When rescuers dug her out hours later, the Velen doctor was dead. Half her patients were dead. She had failed them all. Young Ho Nam found himself in a shelter with hundreds of others. The shelter was built to survive storms, not orbital bombardment. Every time the ground shook, dust fell from the ceiling. People prayed in a dozen languages. Children cried for parents who weren't coming back. An old woman next to Young Ho was holding a dead child. She just sat there, rocking back and forth, humming a lullaby. Young Ho recognized her. She had taught Velen history at the local school. The child was her granddaughter. Young Ho wanted to help. He wanted to say something comforting. But what words existed for this? Admiral Su Yun organized a defense at one of the shelters. He had found 30 people willing to fight with whatever they had. Rifles, pistols, even knives. When the enemy sent ground forces, they would be ready. Except the enemy never sent ground forces. They just kept firing from orbit. They didn't want the planet. They didn't want prisoners. They just wanted everyone dead. Su Yun's rifle felt useless in his hands. He was a soldier with no one to fight. All he could do was watch his world die. In orbit, Ensign Yunji Kang managed to break through the enemy jamming for a few seconds. She sent everything they had learned about the enemy to Earth. Ship designs, weapon signatures, tactical data. And one message. They're called the Krell. They don't negotiate. They don't take prisoners. Send help. Then she sent images. New Jeju burning. Cities in ruins. Bodies in the streets. She made sure Earth would see exactly what happened here. The bombardment lasted 18 hours. When it finally stopped, New Jeju colony was gone. The beautiful cities were craters. The forests were burning. The oceans were choked with ash. Captain Jiwon Park shuttles had saved fewer than 3,000 people. Out of 200,000. The numbers made her sick. The Krell ships left as suddenly as they had arrived. They didn't send a message. They didn't make demands. They just left, looking for their next target. The Harmony's Promise limped through space, carrying survivors and corpses. Ambassador Daeho Kim was dead. He had been at the celebration when the first missiles fell. The man who built peace for humanity had died without knowing why. Ji-won walked through the refugee sections. She saw Admiral Su Yun sitting against a wall, his useless rifle across his lap. She saw Young Ho Nam staring at nothing, his hands still shaking. She saw Dr. Minji Choi working in medical with one arm in a sling, refusing to rest. Everyone looked broken. Everyone looked lost. Hyen Lee found her in the corridor. Captain, we're receiving news from Earth. The Krell attacked 12 other colonies. Millions dead. The Galactic Assembly is holding an emergency session. What are they doing? Ji-won asked. They issued a condemnation. They're forming a committee to study the situation. They suggested sanctions against the Krell. Ji-won laughed. It was a terrible sound, hollow and bitter. Sanctions. Against the species that just killed millions. A committee. Earth's ambassador walked out of the assembly chamber, Hyan continued. The message Earth sent back wasn't diplomatic. Ji-won didn't care about diplomacy anymore. She had been a diplomat. She had believed in peace and treaties and civilization. Look where that got them. She went to the observation deck and stared at the ruined planet below. New Jeju had been proof that humans could change. That they could be better than their violent ancestors. That peace was possible. The Krell had destroyed that proof in 18 hours. They never even told us why, she said to the empty room. They never demanded anything. They never gave us a chance to surrender. They just killed us. She thought about all the years she spent proving humanity wasn't violent. All the weapons they had dismantled. All the soldiers they had retrained as teachers and builders. They had made themselves harmless to prove they were civilized. And the first time someone decided to hurt them, they couldn't fight back. Her communicator buzzed. It was a message from Earth. President G.A. Beek was making a planetary address. Ji-won pulled up the video. The president stood in front of images from New Jeju. Tears ran down her face. She spoke about the children who died, about the peace humanity had worked so hard to build, about friends and allies who believed in a better way. Then her expression changed. Her tears stopped. Her voice became hard as steel. "We tried to be better than what we were," President Beek said. "We succeeded. We became a civilized species. We became peaceful. We became cultured. And look what it earned us. Look at our children burning. Look at our friends dead in the streets." The president paused. When she spoke again, her voice was cold. "They reminded us that sometimes being civilized isn't enough. Sometimes you need to be dangerous. We forgot what we were. We forgot what we're capable of. We thought we could put away our weapons and our violence and our rage. We were wrong. So now we're going to remember. We're going to go back to being what we were before. And we're going to show the Krell why humanity tried so hard to leave that behind." The transmission ended. Ji-won stood in the dark observation deck and felt something shift inside her. The diplomat was dying. Something older, something harder was taking its place. She had tried being civilized. Time to try something else. The Harmony's promise arrived at Earth to find a planet transformed. The peaceful world Ji-won Park had left behind was gone. In its place was something she barely recognized. Dot ships filled the orbital space, but they weren't the exploration vessels and cargo haulers she was used to. These were different, harder, covered in weapons that looked brand new but somehow familiar. Like someone had pulled old blueprints from storage and started building again. Earth Control gave them landing clearance. As the ship descended, Ji-won looked out the window and saw the planet below. Cities were covered in construction. Factories that had been idle for decades were running at full capacity. She could see the smoke, the lights, the constant activity of a world at war. They landed at what used to be a civilian spaceport. Now it was clearly military. Soldiers were everywhere. Not the ceremonial guards humanity had kept around for parades. Real soldiers with real weapons and hard eyes. General Taijin Seo met them at the landing pad. He was an older man, gray-haired and scarred. Ji-won had met him once before at a ceremony. Back then he had seemed like a relic, someone keeping military traditions alive out of nostalgia. Now he looked like he had been waiting his whole life for this moment. "Captain Park," he said, saluting her. "Welcome home." "I'm sorry, it's not the home you left." Ji-won returned the salute. "What's happening, General?" "We're remembering," Seo said simply. "Come with me. You need to see something." He took her and the other survivors to a facility outside the city. The building looked old, like it had been standing unused for years. But now it was active, full of people rushing back and forth. Inside, the walls were lined with weapons. Not ancient swords and spears for museums. Modern military equipment. Weapons that could tear through armor. Explosives that could level buildings. Ship-mounted guns that could crack planets. "We told the galaxy these were historical exhibits," General Seo said. "We told them we had dismantled our military. That was half true. We dismantled the obvious parts. We kept the rest, just in case, hoping we would never need it." Admiral Su Yun walked through the facility with his mouth open. He recognized some of the weapons. He had used versions of them in the old wars. "How much did you keep?" "Enough," Seo said. "Our ceremonial defense force? They've been training for combat the whole time. Our exploration ships? Most of them can be converted to warships in a few weeks. We never forgot how to fight. We just pretended we did." A woman approached them. She wore the uniform of a university professor, but her eyes were sharp. This was Dr. Seojin Ryu, a historian. General ECO had brought her in to teach the new soldiers about humanity's past. The general asked me to brief our forces on human warfare throughout history, Seojin said. Not the sanitized version we teach children. The real thing. I've been studying it for days, and I'm terrified. Do you know what humans are capable of when we're cornered? Tell me, Jaewon said. Seojin pulled up a holographic display. Images filled the air. Ancient battles where humans fought with swords and spears. Modern wars with guns and bombs. Orbital strikes and planetary invasions. Humans fighting humans with a creativity and brutality that made the Krell look simple. Humans are persistence hunters, Seojin explained. We don't give up. We don't show mercy. When we decide something needs to die, we chase it until it does. We adapt, we innovate, we find weaknesses and exploit them. And we do it all with a level of organized violence that no other species has matched. She showed them examples. Humans who had held positions against impossible odds. Tactics that involved sacrifice and cunning in equal measure. Weapons designed specifically to cause maximum suffering. We spent centuries perfecting the art of killing, Seojin said quietly. Then we spent decades trying to forget it. Now we're going to remember. I don't think the galaxy is ready for what we used to be. President Ju Ye-beek addressed the planet that night. The broadcast reached every human in the solar system and beyond. She stood in front of a memorial wall where names were being carved. The dead from New Jeju and the other colonies. Millions of names. They took our children, she said. They burned our homes. They killed our friends. And the galaxy's response was to form a committee, to issue condemnations, to suggest we try diplomacy with murderers. Her hands clenched into fists. We will not be asking for permission anymore. We will not be waiting for galactic approval. We will not be limited by laws that couldn't protect us. We are withdrawing from the Galactic Assembly effective immediately. The announcement shocked the galaxy. Humanity had worked for decades to join the Assembly. They had followed every rule, passed every test. And now they were just walking away. The Assembly sent delegations to Earth demanding they reconsider. General Seo met with them personally. The meeting was short. You promised us protection, Seo told them. You promised that galactic law would keep us safe. Where was that protection when our children were dying? Where was galactic law when the Krell fired on hospitals? The alien diplomats had no answer. We followed your rules, Seo continued. We disarmed. We trusted you. And millions died because of it. So now we're going back to our own rules. The old human rules. And the first rule is simple. We protect our own and damn anyone who tries to stop us. Commander Minho An activated training facilities on Mars and in the asteroid belt. These weren't new buildings. They had always been there, hidden as research stations and mining operations. Now their true purpose was revealed. Young people were volunteering by the millions. Among them was Young Ho Nam. The musician who had never held a weapon was learning to field-strip rifles and throw grenades. His hands, trained to play music, were learning to kill. Why are you here? Commander Minho asked him during training. Young Ho didn't hesitate. Because I watched my friends die. Because I hid in a shelter while the Krell murdered children. Because I want to make sure it never happens again. What about your music? There will be time for music when the Krell are dead. Dr. Minji Choi found herself in a very different kind of medical facility. They were teaching combat medicine, how to treat injuries on battlefields. But they were also teaching her about Krell biology, weaknesses in their armor, points where human weapons could do the most damage. She felt sick learning it. This wasn't healing. This was learning to kill more efficiently. But she attended every class and took notes. because every Krell weakness she learned meant more humans who would survive. The Krell attacked another colony, Titan, one of Saturn's moons where humans had lived for generations. The Krell expected another easy slaughter. They found something different. Human warships were waiting. Crude compared to Krell technology, but numerous. They swarmed the Krell fleet like angry insects. Most of them died quickly, but they kept coming. And while they died, they learned. Human soldiers on Titan's surface didn't run. They dug in and fought. They used tactics from Earth's ancient wars, ambushers, traps, guerrilla warfare. The Krell had superior weapons, but humans had desperation and rage. The battle lasted 3 days. The Krell won. They killed most of the defenders and destroyed the colony. But they took casualties for the first time. 5 Krell ships were destroyed. Hundreds of Krell soldiers were dead. It wasn't a victory for humanity. But it was something. It was proof they could bleed. General Isio analyzed the battle data with his staff. Captain Jiwon Park was there. She had been given command of a new ship, still being built. Lieutenant Hyan Lee was training special forces. Everyone from the Harmony's Promise had found new roles in this new military. They're confused, Isio said, studying the Krell tactics. They fought species that relied on technology, on superior numbers, on defensive positions. They don't know what to do with soldiers who won't retreat, who keep fighting even when they're surrounded. Because they've never fought humans before, Jiwon said. They've never fought a species that learned warfare by fighting itself for thousands of years. Dr. Minji Choi provided the medical analysis. I found something in the battle footage. When Krell armor is hit in a specific spot, near their thorax, it weakens the whole structure. Our weapons aren't strong enough to break through the front, but if we hit that weak point, we can kill them. The information spread through every human military unit. Target the thorax. Aim for the weakness. Make every shot count. President Beak made another address. She was surrounded by engineers and scientists now, not diplomats. The Krell think they can exterminate us, she said. They think we're just another species to be crushed. They're wrong. They don't know what we are. They don't know what we're capable of. They're about to learn. Behind her, workers were building things. New ships. New weapons. Things the galaxy had never seen before because humanity had promised to leave such weapons in their past. We're not asking for help, Beak continued. We're not begging for protection. We're done being the civilized newcomers who follow every rule. We're going back to being what we were. And what we were was very, very good at surviving. The broadcast showed footage from Titan. Human soldiers fighting to their last breath. Ships ramming Krell vessels when their weapons failed. Medics running into fire to save the wounded. We're done being cultured, President Beak said. We're done being peaceful. We're done being civil. The Krell wanted war. Now they're going to learn what war means when humans fight it. Admiral Su Yoon watched the broadcast from his temporary quarters 6 months after New Jeju burned. The galaxy began to understand what they had unleashed. Captain Wan Siak Chai commanded the Reckoning, one of Earth's first true warships built since the war began. It didn't look like the sleek vessels other species flew. It looked like it had been hammered together from scrap metal and rage, which wasn't far from the truth. The ship hung in the shadow of an asteroid, waiting. Below, a Krell supply convoy was moving through the system. 3 cargo ships, 2 escorts. Standard formation. They thought they were safe. Target the escorts first, Wan Siak ordered. Fire on my mark. The Reckoning burst from hiding. Its weapons weren't as powerful as Krell guns, but humans had learned to make up for that with tactics. The first escort exploded before it knew it was under attack. The second managed to raise shields, but the Reckoning was already moving. Circling behind it. Use the mining charges, Monsiok said. His crew launched modified mining explosives, cheap weapons that the Krell wouldn't expect. They stuck to the escort's hull and detonated. The ship cracked open like an egg. The cargo ships tried to run. The reckoning hunted them down one by one. When it was over, 5 Krell ships were debris, and the reckoning vanished back into the asteroid field. This was the new human way of war. No honor, no fair fights. Hit hard, hit fast, then disappear. The Krell were learning to fear shadows. Intelligence officer Ji Yong-song worked in a facility deep underground on Earth. Her job was psychological warfare. She had studied every piece of data they had on Krell psychology. She knew what scared them. Broadcast this on all Krell frequencies, she told her team. She played a recording. It was the sound of Krell dying, their screams mixed with human voices counting down numbers. The number of Krell killed so far. The number still to go. Is this necessary? One of her assistants asked, looking sick. Necessary? Jiang's voice was cold. They killed children. They bombed hospitals. And you're worried about being mean to them? Broadcast it. Make them hear it every hour. Make them know we're coming. The broadcasts went out. Krell ships started reporting crew members with signs of fear and stress. Some refused to leave their ships. Some demanded to return home. The proud, ancient species was learning what terror felt like. Engineer Hannah designed weapons in a lab that officially didn't exist. The Galactic Assembly had laws against certain types of weapons. Biological agents, nanite swarms, planet killers. Humanity had signed treaties, promising never to develop such things. Hannah didn't care about treaties anymore. She built them all. Her nanite swarms could eat through Krell hulls in minutes, spreading like disease through their ships. Her biological agents were tailored specifically to Krell physiology. Her kinetic weapons could turn asteroids into weapons that would crack planets. When other species found out and protested, Earth's response was simple: stop us. No one tried. Private Bowman Han was 20 years old. He had enlisted the day after New Jeju fell. Now he was a Marine, part of a boarding team that specialized in taking Krell ships. They didn't capture ships to gain technology or intel. They did it to send messages. Bowman's team breached a Krell frigate using cutting torches and explosives. They moved through the corridors in zero gravity, hunting Krell crew. The fighting was close and brutal. Bowman had stopped thinking about the Krell as living beings. They were targets. Problems to solve. Things that needed to die. When the ship was clear, they left it drifting with one modification. They painted a message on the hull in Krell symbols. We're coming for all of you. Then they set it on a course toward Krell space and left. Bowman didn't sleep well anymore. He wrote letters home that he never sent, describing what he did. In the letters, he tried to explain why it was necessary, why the Krell needed to fear humanity. But the words felt hollow. He suspected he was trying to convince himself more than anyone else. Dr. Minji Choi made a discovery that changed the war. She was analyzing battle footage when she noticed something. Krell fleets always had one ship that stayed back, protected by the others. When that ship gave orders, the other ships obeyed instantly. She ran tests and confirmed it. The Krell had a hive structure. Queen ships coordinated entire fleets. Kill the queen, the fleet fell apart. She brought the information to General Seo. He listened in silence. You're talking about targeting command ships, Seo said. That's standard warfare. No, Minji said quietly. I'm talking about targeting non-combatants. The Queen ships don't have weapons. They're essentially civilians. The Krell protect them because they're important to their society. If we kill them, we're no better than the species that bombed our hospitals? Seo's voice was hard. Than the ones who killed our children on purpose? We're not having a moral debate, Doctor. You've given us a way to win. We're using it. Minji wanted to argue. She wanted to say this was wrong. But she thought about the people who had died on New Jeju, about the patients she couldn't save, about the Velen doctor who died next to her. She authorized the operation. Captain Ji-won Park led the first queen hunt. She commanded 3 ships, fast and deadly. They found a Krell fleet in deep space and identified the queen ship. It was beautiful, covered in intricate designs. It broadcast signals coordinating its fleet. Fire, Ji-won ordered. Her ships concentrated fire on the queen. It had shields, but no weapons. It died quickly. The rest of the Krell fleet immediately became disorganized. Ships collided with each other. Some fled in random directions. Ji-won's ships hunted them down. That night, Ji-won looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back. The diplomat who believed in peace was dead. In her place was something harder. A killer who was very good at her job. She thought about Ambassador Daeho Kim. What would he say if he could see her now? Would he be ashamed? Would he understand? She would never know. The old man who built bridges was dead, and Ji-won had become an assassin. Admiral Su Yoon watched Earth's transformation from a distance. He trained soldiers, teaching them tactics from the old wars. But late at night, he wondered what would be left of humanity when this was over. They were winning. Krell fleets were retreating. Krell colonies were being evacuated. The ancient species was learning fear for the first time in their history. But at what cost? Humans were becoming the monsters they fought. They used weapons that were banned by galactic law. They showed no mercy. They hunted the Krell with a dedication that bordered on madness. We're going to win, Su Yoon told Ji-won during one of her visits to Earth. But I don't know if we'll survive it. Not as the species we wanted to be. We stopped being that species the day New Jeju burned, Ji-won said. This is who we are now. Maybe this is who we always were, and we were just pretending. The Galactic Assembly watched humanity's war with growing horror. They saw the weapons humans used. They heard the broadcast designed to terrify the Krell. They watched as humans systematically dismantled an ancient species with tactics that seemed to come from nightmares. An assembly delegation came to Earth to negotiate. They wanted humanity to stop, to show restraint, to prove they were still civilized. President G.A. Beek met with them personally. The meeting was broadcast across human space. You want us to show restraint? She asked. You want us to fight nicely? Where was this concern when the Krell were slaughtering millions? Where were you when our children were dying? The alien diplomats had no answer. We'll stop when the Krell are extinct, Beek said flatly. Not before. If you have a problem with our methods, you're welcome to try and stop us. But remember, if you become our enemy, we'll treat you the same way we're treating them. The delegation left without another word. The Krell tried to retreat. Their ancient empire, which had stood for thousands of years, was collapsing. They pulled back to their core systems, abandoning everything else. They sent messages trying to negotiate. Humanity's response was to broadcast the footage from New Jeju. Children burning. Cities collapsing. Millions dead. You didn't negotiate with us, the message said. We're not negotiating with you. Young Ho Nam had become a demolitions expert. He no longer thought about music. He thought about how to destroy Krell ships most efficiently. His old life felt like it belonged to someone else. He was part of a team that infiltrated a Krell station. They moved through it like ghosts, planting explosives. When they were done, the station had enough charges to tear it apart. Before they left, Young Ho found a Krell family hiding in a storage room. A parent and 2 young. They looked terrified. They looked exactly like the families he had seen die on New Jeju. He stood there with his weapon, looking at them. His team was waiting for him. The charges were set. He could just leave them, but he thought about the Krell who had killed his friends, who had bombed the concert hall, who had shown no mercy to anyone. He set another charge in the storage room and left. Later, he would tell himself it was necessary, that the Krell young would have grown up to kill more humans, that there was no room for mercy in this war. But sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he saw their faces. The hunt continued. Human fleets pursued the Krell across the galaxy. Every retreat was harried. Every colony was destroyed. Every ship was hunted down. The galaxy watched and wondered if they had made a mistake. They had wanted humanity to join them, to prove humans could be civilized. 2 years after New Jeju, humanity found the Krell homeworld. The Reckoning hung in orbit with 50 other human warships. Below them was the planet where the Krell species had begun millions of years ago. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, green continents, cities that glittered in the sunlight. Captain Wan Siak Chai stood on his bridge and stared at it. One order. That's all it would take. One order on the Krell species would be extinct. Captain, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the surface, his communications officer said. They're begging us to stop. Wan Siak had heard Krell communications before. They never begged. They never showed fear. But now, facing extinction, they were pleading for their lives. He thought about New Jeju, about the colonies that burned, about the millions of humans who had died begging for mercy that never came. Ignore them, he said. Prepare to fire. On Earth, the debate was tearing humanity apart. President G.A. Beek had called for a vote. Not among politicians, but among the survivors of the Krell attacks. Councillor Kyung-min Lee led the opposition. He stood in front of the assembly with images of Krell young behind him. They looked almost human. Small, scared, hiding from the humans who had come to kill them. If we do this, we're no better than them, Kyung-min said. We'll have committed genocide. We'll have become the monsters we swore we weren't. They killed our children first, someone shouted from the crowd. So we should kill theirs? Is that who we are? Narration, a civilian activist, had organized protests in every major city on Earth. She showed footage of human atrocities. Krell prisoners executed. Krell civilians caught in human attacks. Weapons that were banned by every civilized species. We've become what we hated, Nari said. We've let our pain and rage turn us into killers. If we destroy the Krell homeworld, we'll never be able to claim we're civilized again. General Taijin Seo stood against them. He had images of his own. New Jeju burning. Titan falling. The 12 colonies that had been wiped out in the first wave of attacks. They started this, Seo said. They killed millions of us without warning, without mercy, without even trying to communicate. Now they're losing and suddenly they want to talk. Suddenly they have children we should care about. Where was this concern when they were killing ours? So we should be like them? Kyungmin shot back. We should make sure they can never hurt us again. The only way to do that is to end them completely. Dr. Minji Choi was planetside with the invasion force. She had been sent to assess the Krell homeworld's defenses. Instead, she had found something that changed everything. The Krell had children. Millions of them, hidden in underground shelters. They were small and defenseless, nothing like the warriors humanity had fought. They looked terrified. Minji recorded everything and sent it back to Earth. Then she sat in her transport and cried. She had given humanity the information they needed to win the war. She had helped kill thousands of Krell, and now she was looking at their children and wondering what she had become. Major Sunwoo Park, Jiwon's younger brother, commanded the ground forces. He had fought on 6 worlds, killed more Krell than he could count. He was good at it. Too good. He found Minji in her transport. Doctor, we need you to identify structural weaknesses in the shelter systems. The general wants to know how to collapse them most efficiently. Minji looked at him with horror. Those are civilian shelters. There are children in there. There were children on New Jeju too. So, we're gonna kill their children because they killed ours? That makes us murderers, not soldiers. Sunwoo's face was hard. I don't care what it makes us. I care about making sure the Krell can never attack humanity again. He left to prepare his troops. Minji sat alone, wondering if refusing would even matter. The war had its own momentum now. She wasn't sure anyone could stop it. Captain Jiwon Park arrived at the Krell homeworld with the second wave. She stood on the bridge of her ship and looked at the planet where millions of Krell waited to die. She thought about her brother down there, preparing to slaughter civilians. She thought about all the lives she had taken in the past 2 years. The Queen ship she had destroyed. The retreating Krell fleets she had hunted down. At what point had she stopped being a soldier and become a murderer? Young Ho Nam was part of the ground force. He had his orders. When the attack began, his team would breach the civilian shelters and eliminate everyone inside. No survivors. No witnesses. He checked his weapons mechanically. He had done this before. He could do it again. He just had to not think about it. Not think about the faces. Not think about what it meant. One of his squad mates was praying quietly. Another was throwing up in the corner. They all knew what they were about to do. They all knew they would have to live with it forever. If they went through with it, on Earth, Admiral Su Yun requested permission to address the assembly. The old warrior looked tired. He had trained thousands of soldiers, helped plan dozens of operations. His hands were as stained with Krell blood as anyone's. I lost everything on New Jeju, he said quietly. My wife, my grandchildren. My whole world burned while I watched. I wanted revenge. I wanted every Krell dead. I helped train the soldiers who killed them. I helped plan the operations that destroyed their fleets. He paused, looking at the images of the Krell homeworld. But if we do this, if we kill their children, we become the thing we're fighting. We become the species that commits genocide. And we can never take that back. Never. They didn't give us a choice, someone shouted. No, they didn't. They made us into killers. But we can choose not to become monsters. We can choose to be better than them, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The assembly erupted into arguments. Half wanted total extermination. Half wanted mercy. The vote was going to be close. President Beek sat in her office, watching the debate. She had to make the final call. Millions of survivors expected her to avenge their dead. Millions more begged her to show mercy. She thought about Ambassador Daeho Kim, the man who had believed humanity could change, who would spend his life proving they weren't the violent species everyone feared. He had died in the first attack, never knowing if his life's work meant anything. Intelligence Officer Jeong Song intercepted a Krell transmission. It was a message from the homeworld to any surviving Krell forces. It was a plea, not for military help, not for rescue. They were asking for forgiveness, admitting they had made a mistake attacking humanity, begging for their children's lives. Ji Young stared at the translation. The proud, ancient species that had never shown mercy was reduced to begging. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt hollow. She forwarded the message to President Beek with a note, "They're broken. The question is whether we need to exterminate them to keep them that way." The vote among survivors finally happened. Every person who had lost someone to the Krell attacks got to vote on whether to destroy the homeworld. It was the closest vote in human history. In the end, it came down to one vote. Admiral Su Yun, who had lost everything, cast the deciding vote. Mercy. The transmission went out to the fleet. Stand down. Do not fire on the homeworld. Prepare for negotiation. Captain Wan Sia Chai received the order and slumped in his chair. He didn't know if he felt relieved or cheated. His crew looked equally confused. They had been ready. They had been willing. Now they had to find a way to live with what they had almost done. Major Sunwoo Park received the order planetside and immediately ordered his troops to stand down. Some of them looked relieved. Others looked angry, like they had been denied something important. Young Ho Nam put down his weapons and walked away from his squad. He sat against a wall and just breathed. He had been seconds away from killing children. Seconds away from becoming something he could never come back from. He had survived the war. He wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. President Beak addressed the galaxy. Not just humans, but every species watching to see what humanity would do. The Krell attacked us without mercy, she said. They killed millions. They destroyed our colonies. They made us remember what we were, what we're capable of. We hunted them across the galaxy. We destroyed their fleets. We brought them to the edge of extinction. She paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. And now we're stopping. Not because we can't finish them. We could. We have them at our mercy. But we're choosing not to become the monsters they made us fight. We're choosing to be better than them, even though it's hard. Even though many of us want revenge. The Krell will surrender completely. They will dismantle their military. They will isolate themselves to their homeworld for 1,000 years under human oversight. If they ever threaten anyone again, we will finish what we started. But their children will live. Because we're not murderers. We're survivors. And we're strong enough to choose mercy even when we don't have to. The Galactic Assembly requested Earth's return. Captain Jiwon Park, no longer the bright diplomat but a scarred veteran, addressed them. You're afraid of us now, she told the assembled species. You should be. You watched us become the thing you always feared. You watched us remember how to wage total war. You watched us nearly commit genocide. But you also watched us stop. You watched us choose mercy when we had every reason not to. That's what you need to understand about humanity. We can be the civilized species you wanted. We can be diplomats and peacemakers and artists.